So in this video, I'm going to describe how the story of Titanic, specifically the James Cameron film, is actually a retelling of the story of the sun and the moon and the sun and moon's love story or dance in the sky. Now, what's interesting about Titanic is it's a so-called truthful event, and the film decided to go the route of making fictional characters. But what's interesting is they both resonate because there's truth or a natural aspect to both of them, and they both point to the sky. So when you hear the stories, even if they're true or not, they are believable or they have a special resonating magic with whoever's viewing it because it's a natural story just being retold and encoded. So in this film, in the James Cameron film, the movie starts off very bright. It starts off when they're boarding the ship. It's overly sunny. He did a great job of perfectly highlighting the sky, almost giving you like a blaring effect about how powerful the sun is. And what's interesting in the beginning, you can see every grain and detail of the ship and the people's attire and outfits as they're getting on. But as the movie progresses, it gets darker and darker, specifically the sky. You can see that the moon's in play. You can see it's dawning at some point, especially as you get towards the end. And then you can see that by the end of the film, it's a cold moon. And the main characters are in the water freezing. Right. And it's almost like the sun had to sacrifice so that the moon can go up in the sky. And that's, pretty much the story of what you're seeing. But most people don't get it, that there's actually a story about the sun and the moon. What you should try doing if you watch the film again is replace both the characters with the idea of sun and moon and listen specifically to their dialogue, how they talk to people. People call some people sunny, how they interact with other people on the ship who don't know them. They say, don't mind us, we're just here running by. It's a play on us not realizing that the sun and moon are important to look up at in the sky. It's out every day, but most people don't even look at it, But let's start with Jack. So Jack is played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And of course, Leonardo DiCaprio is a pretty popular actor. And I think he really sold this film. His looks was really what made a lot of the people who saw it wanted to go see it. And what's interesting is, I wouldn't say like the acting is amazing or anything like that, but Rose's character is not even an interesting character in the film, but just how well of a love story and a natural aspect it is, it ends up still being enjoyable, right? But every time they show Jack Dawson, which is a play on the words dawn and sun, right, indicating that he's the sun, every time they show this character, especially in the beginning of the film, the sun is shining on him in a unique way. It's almost like he's glowing like Simba from The Lion King. And it's the same idea as that, where you have Leo the lion. They both represent the sun at their peak. So you have them glowing, right? But with Jack Dawson, right, it's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who's the leading role. And this is where he was specifically chosen because he is Leo the lion. And there's a lot of films that Leonardo DiCaprio is placed into mainly because of his name and the position of the sun that he represents. But then we have Rose, who is pretty much the moon. The name Rose points back to fertility. So I knew once her name was Rose, I realized that she was going to be the spring-based character. And whenever you have a female and they're named after a flower, they're usually going to be weak in the beginning and then they get strong or stronger personality-wise than everyone by the end of the film or the next arc. And we see this happen with Rose. By the end of the movie, she's accomplishing all the things that she was afraid of, like flying an airplane and things like that. And this is done to let you know that since she's the spring, she is strong, or the strongest point. But also, she represents the moon. Rose is Rose is a flower that's also associated with the moon and usually with tragedy. If you're familiar with the idea of Selena, the singer, and her play on the moon goddess, and the rose is thrown on stage for her, it's all the same ideas, just retold in different stories. But what's interesting, when Rose is first introduced, she gets off the ship with a large hat on her head. And, they did a really good job of showing the details of the ship and everyone else getting on the ship and all the vehicles and all. But they overly made her pale. And that was just to let you know she was the moon. But then she also had this obnoxious large hat to block off the rays of the sun. And you see this in a lot of female characters when they represent the moon. This scene is almost scene for scene in the Christopher Nolan Batman, where Christian Bale, and I say their names because it lets you know that it's the sun, Christian, Chris, the sun, and where Batman is going out with, or he's fighting Bane. But there's a character named Selena Kyle, which is a play on the moon goddess, Selene, and she is wearing the same hat as Rose, just to let you know that she represents the moon, and the moon and the sun. Both, there's a sacrifice where the sun fakes his death and he goes out into the water and explodes like the sun. And then they both go off into, start a new arc. But it's the same idea, just seen in different films. And these characters, there's a lot of names that point to females being the moon. I'll make a separate video going over that. But more so on Rose, when you see her, especially as she's an older lady, she has this moonlight glow to her, especially when she's out at night. She's like glowing the ship. There's a glow just surrounding her. And then a lot of language that she uses directly references Jesus or God or being saved by him, like no one else can save you. It's all a play on the idea of what the moon and the sun do in the sky, right? Now, when Jack and Rose first meet, I believe Rose is trying to kill herself out on the back of the ship. She's trying to jump off, right? And we see this jumping off kind of happening into a lot of female moon characters, like Gamora in the Avengers series. She was thrown off, as a sacrifice. Well, you see Rose, trying to make the idea that she wants to jump off the ship. And prior to that, you have Jack, who's in the front of the ship, saying he's the king of the world. So just letting you know the different positions of the moon and the sun. But as the film progresses and their relationship kindles, we have a scene where Rose has her arms out like the cross, and Jack is behind her, and he's like, "Do you trust me?" And it's just showing pretty much an eclipse. You see the sky start to dawn or change characteristics, and that's kind of when the film also starts to switch gears, right? And that's not by coincidence. This is a retelling of what the sky is doing. Now, we see this kind of character of like Leo and a moon-based female character in a lot of other films. I believe there was a Final Fantasy movie where the first shot is Leo the lion running, and then immediately after, Elena or Selena, the moon goddess, dies. Or she's in a crater that looks exactly like the moon. And these same kind of concepts happen over and over. Elena is another name that could be representing the moon. In Fast and Furious, Elena gets shot just the same way that Abe Lincoln gets shot, which is the moon, in a dark room, and the lights come on. It's kind of surrounding that murder. But we have that same kind of idea. But in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which is an unrelated movie, there's a Leo character, and he's dating a woman named Lena, who's also play on the idea of Selena, the moon goddess. And whenever you have these female moon characters, there's usually going to be tragedies surrounding them. Maybe the sun might get sacrificed, or something will happen to the sun, or somebody like their friend could get hurt. But in this story, what happens is her close friend randomly dies, like a tragedy all of a sudden. And if you know the play of Lena and Leo, or Selena and the moon and the sun, you would know that was coming. And then there's also what's interesting. This film has an inverse scene where the moon is painting the sun, where Lena is painting Leo nude, and then in Titanic you have Leo painting Rose, the moon, nude. Now, as the film progresses, it gets darker outside. The dawning is happening, and you should know that the tone is being set for disaster, right? And it's not just good shots to take. They're telling you a deeper story on a deeper level, but most people are missing it. That, pretty much the sun is being eclipsed or dawned away. And what's interesting is at that point, there's kind of like a lockdown where they are all stuck in the bottom. The second tier guests or third tier guests are told they can't leave the ship. And I wonder, if that's by design, if every time there's an eclipse, or if there's an eclipse, you can leverage that idea, just thinking about what the word corona actually means. It actually means it has to do with eclipse. But what's interesting is, so by the end of this movie, you have Jack in the water, right? And all his glow is gone. He's now pale, right, and freezing. And Rose, who's the moon, is standing up on the night sky or on the water top. And you see this kind of battle where the sun and the moon will fight for the position. And sometimes they'll pull each other up in different films or books. Sometimes they'll push the other one down. But it's this constant dance of the sun and the moon being in the sky, right? But we see that Jack is freezing. He's starting to die. He's going to die. The sunlight is out. And Rose, who's the moon, is up, right? And then you see Jack sink into the water. And there's an almost scene for scene in the Batman film where Joker is falling off the building the same way. And whenever you have these positions where like the characters are up in the sky, it's to let you know that they represent the stars, right? So you have Batman, and his symbol in this film is a yellow background surrounding a bat, and to let you know that he's the sun character and Joker is the moon character, or vice versa. It could happen, but he drops Joker off the building almost scene for scene, just the same way that Jack in Titanic is dropped off. And we see this kind of idea in the Captain America films. Captain America is the star or the sun, and Bucky the buck moon, and they both go back and forth with pulling each other out of the water. Same thing scene for scene in the Sonic movie with Sonic and Knuckles. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, Knuckles has a moon crescent on his chest to let you know he's the moon. Sonic started off as the moon, but by the end of the film, he becomes the sun. But there's an exchange where they are saving each other out of the water. And that's a play on the sun and the moon battling for position of the sky. And the reason why it seems like such a cool or emotional scene, because it's natural story, just retold through characters in the films, But, and then as the film progresses, you have Jack and Rose on the top of the back of the ship, the last ones to go in the water, but the ship goes up into the air. Now, there's a lot of people who say that didn't actually happen, and it might have just been added for the film. But the idea is to let you know that these characters are the stars. They're up in the air. And you see this kind of idea in superhero films all the time, where the character is standing on top of the building for no reason when their powers allow them to take care of the problem on the ground. You'll have someone like Catwoman up on the top of a skyscraper posing. It's not more convenient to go all the way up the top of the skyscraper. But the reason why they do those action shots is because it's a play on, it's challenging your subconscious for you to see if you can recognize that these characters are positions of the stars or not. And most people don't get it. And you can challenge this idea. To give you an example, there's a new comic book company coming out. I think there's a guy named Young Rippa on YouTube. And he has a comic book company that he started. And you can look at the character designs in his comic books. You can already see that even if he might be telling an original story, they still follow nature, right? So it's not an original story. It's just a retelling. And that doesn't mean it's not interesting. It's just that you can see the stars associated with characters. You can see elements associated with characters. So you can already predict who are the next characters are going to be. And that's just interesting to see that, even original stories can't sway from this because it's all natural. But yeah, so you have, by the end of the film, you have Jack and Rose up in the air, right? Now, what's interesting about this film is, as it ends, you have Rose, who is an old lady. 84 years have passed, and there's some relevance to orbiting in space that occurs every 84 years. I just don't know it offhand, but the orbit of the sun and the moon, or the planets that occur every 84 years. And what's interesting is Rose goes back to the same exact spot that Jack, or the sun, was laid down into the ocean, and or all of the other people on the ship, right? And I think she throws the heart of the ocean back into the ocean, right? And then immediately after that scene, she goes into her room and sleeps in dreams like Selena, the moon goddess, and dies in her dreams, right? But in her dreams, she sees Jack again at the top of the stairs, or the stars, and that grand staircase is actually a character in this film to let you know that these people are elevated when they're at the top of the stairs, right? But she dies in her sleep, and then you can kind of see that a new moon is being created in her granddaughter and Brock, right? And Brock is a play on the word moon, rock. Whenever you have a character named Brock, like for example in Pokemon, he's with Ash, and Ash usually represents an angle of the sun. You look at the symbols on his head or his hat, and it'll usually change to Saturn, to the sun, to the moon crescent, or depending on what series they're in and when it was released and all. But yeah, that's what we have happen to Rose at the end. The new moon is established, or the new love story is established, and her granddaughter. And I may be wrong. I think her granddaughter's name is Christine. So you have that play on the sun and the moon. And we see this kind of play on sun and the moon a lot. Most celebrities who are people put in place to reenact what happens in the sky. It's just that we as people don't have the full knowledge of myth and language to know who these characters represent. But they're called celebrites, or the stars, the movie stars, right? And every time you have a celebrity who's named after the moon, him and his spouse may be named Moon also, or may be named after the sun. And usually you can see the direct, most common ones, there will be some kind of tragedy surrounding them. To give you the example of Selena, the singer who was died, her husband's name was Chris. And then her father's name was Abe, which is a play on the moon. So you have the sun, you have her father, the moon, the daughter, the moon, and then her son, her husband, who's the sun. And we see the same kind of thing happen and play out in the real world. We have Chris Evans now dating Selena Gomez. We have Chrissy Teigen and John the Baptist Legend, and their children's names are after the moon, or the distance that the sun travels. This goes on and on. Chris Rock, some characters have both a play on the sun and the moon. Dwayne Rock Johnson. These are all characters who are playing the moon. And James Cameron's name himself, actually, the word Cameron has Ron in it, right? And the word Ron is associated with the moon, like Ron and Don or Mac. When you hear these words, Lincoln, you should know that these are moon-based characters. And when you see tragedy occurs around them, you shouldn't be surprised. For example, Mac Miller, Craig Mack, and Biggie Smalls, Chris Wallace. These are all the same concepts. And it just plays out in the real world. And I'm not trying to say these are conspiracies where these people are being, where rituals are occurring. I just want you to be able to see that what happens here also mimics what's going on up there. And the same thing with stories. There can't be really an original story. So, and, we have Cameron Diaz, which is also a play on the idea of like Ron and Day, which is moon and day. We have Rosaria Dawson, who's a play on both the rose and sun idea. And you see this over and over. Like there's nothing original about it. And to cap this off, like when you're watching Titanic, just try to reimagine the film with the idea that these characters are the sun and the moon, and you'll be able to see the dialogue has so much more deeper meaning. Rose and Jack are both dancing, and then they're orbiting or spinning around each other, and Jack has to apologize to Corona or the eclipse, like, I'm sorry, Cora, you're still my favorite girl, because he can't dance with her. And this kind of interaction happens all throughout the film, but most people just don't have the knowledge or language to know that that's what's really being shown. And like I was saying earlier, that staircase is actually a character in the film. You show all the elite come down it, right? But Amelia, above it is a skylight or a window that is shaped in the sun, and they always go up to show it glowing, right? But as tragedy strikes in the film, when the boat started to get flooded, that color turns into the moon, and it let you know that gears were switched. But when the film ends and Rose is proceeding up the steps to see Jack, Jack is glowing more than he's been glowing since the beginning of the film. But then the very last shot of the film goes up to that window in the sky, which is the sun glowing. So the film is just telling you that, these are recycled stories. It'll keep occurring. The sun and the moon will keep dancing. The moon is always going to have a new phase or a new moon every month. And you don't have to worry because it will continue. This is why you have the song, My Heart Will Go On. It's letting you know that this will continue. And it's funny that Celine Dion is actually the soundtrack, or the person who's assigned the soundtrack. And a lot of the art on the soundtrack is all moon-based. But remember, Celine is a play on the moon goddess Celine. And so we have Celine Dion, who all those rumors about adrenochrome and things, these are all just plays on words because these characters represent certain aspects of nature. So you have Celine, the moon goddess, who has pretty much done the soundtrack for the film, and all of it is moon based, right? What another interesting thing I wanted to, just to let you know that just consider that these stories may not be true, right? They just could be retellings of the same stories, right? Or something in nature. To give you some background on what they say happened in the real world is Titanic was one of three ships, a trinity of ships, and the one ship was called the Olympus, and the other Titanic and Britannica, I believe. Well, Titanic sank, which is based on the Saturn moon idea. So it's the moon, and Olympus sounds like heaven or the sun, right? But it's the same idea of like the Plymouth and the Mayflower. The word Mayflower has to do with the sun, and then the Plymouth has to do with the moon. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Whenever you have Plymouth, you're looking at the moon. And if you pay attention, most luxury brand vehicles in the US are moon based, whereas the non luxury brands are sun based. And, Plymouth, some of the truck brands also are moon based. Like you have Plymouth, Mac, Lincoln. So the unused American brands, the unpopular ones, are all usually moon based. But yeah, that's what happens in that setting. And then they say that there was this nurse that survived somehow the sinking of all three ships. When you start to hear the stories, none of it really makes sense. There's people who say it didn't occur, people who say they can go back to the exact spot that it's said to be at on Google, and they're unable to find anything. Remember, this was a film where they made a replica and supposedly also found the real one. And I think these words are mind games to play with you, you know. And then there's also people who say the ship didn't even really go up in the air. But what I can tell you is, I think there's an encode in the story. I think it has to do with Titan. And the initial story we get is there was a super moon or a blood moon a couple days before, a week before, and then it affected the gravitational pull, and then icebergs were broken off. And that's how, if it wasn't for that event, that super moon, then the Titanic would have never sank. So we have the moon already at play. And we see the moon is always associated with tragedy, like Abe Lincoln is a moon president. He may not even be real. He might be the moon. JFK went to the moon. Everyone associated with moon or Lincoln or these other moon words, there's usually tragedy. Lincoln Park, Mac Miller. I can keep going on, but I'm not trying to, have you think that these are all conspiracies. More so that these might just be events that mimic what go on in the sky, right? So you have now what's interesting, unrelated but kind of related, in the last Avengers film, or one of the last Avengers films, the Infinity War and the Endgame saga, they go to a planet called Titan, right? And Titan is, remember, Saturn's moon. Now, in that film, the villain Thanos, he's like a play on God, but he's also a moon-based character. This is why they reference him to Grimace. This is why there's a sacrifice with his daughter. It's all moon-based, right? This is why he even throws a supermoon at the characters, right? But when they get to Titan, they're telling you the same story that you always hear whenever you hear about Titan or Saturn's moon. The abundance or the not abundance of resources. It's when they first arrive there, it's all dawning like towards the end of Titanic. But then when he shows when it was great, it's a bright, sunny, beautiful place, right? And as it gets darker, or as the event occurs, the gravitational pull weakens on the planet and it becomes unstable. And there's an argument about resources. You should watch this video with Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Neil and Digrass Tyson, who's a sun-based character. And he has a video on Titan that occurred years before these movies came out. And it's almost scene for scene, or the ideas are the same. And it also includes going underwater like the Titanic. It also includes resources. It also includes the gravitational pull, the moon, supermoon events. So there's a definite encode in what's being told about the ship, the Titanic event, and then the idea of Titan, And just think about Wrath of the Titans, all these things, Attack on Titan. The characters on Attack on Titan look like they could be the moon, an angry moon, when they show them in certain categories of art. I don't know if you've played the Zelda series where Link, as in Lincoln, has the moon chasing him. And this is all the same ideas. It's in every country. There's nobody exempt from it. They all follow the same rules and embodying or personifying characters in stories based off of the sky. But before they arrive on this place Titan, the Avengers, there's a lot of references specifically to James Cameron's films. You know, Spider-Man is telling Iron Man, "Have you ever seen Aliens?" You know, because they're playing with those who are aware enough to say, "Oh, they're talking about James Cameron now. What else is James Cameron big for?" And Iron Man says to him at some points, "I don't want no more pop references. Stop with the movie quotes." And even when they land on Titan, they do the same thing. But before they land on Titan, they beat the villain that's on the ship with them. And the way they beat him is he becomes ice and breaks a hole in the ship. And then they overuse ice afterwards, right? And every time you hear about Titan, Attack of the Titans, anything, there's going to be some ice element to it, right? Because it's the moon. Same thing with any moon story, like the idea of dinosaurs, which is a play on the moon. That's why they have an ice age. But what happens after that scene in Avengers is the guy goes out in space and freezes. Now there's a hole in the ship, and the ship becomes unstable. And then they crash onto Titan. And what's interesting is when they show the words Titan across the screen, their ship is pointed up to make it look like the Titanic up in the air. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because after that event, you start to see a lot of James Cameron quotes about Titanic and Avengers being challenged by it. And there's pictures of James Cameron with Titanic and Thanos with Titanic. It is almost like a play that they know that most of us can't catch on, and they're telling you the same story, just encode it, you know? So to end this video, you know, just think about the film as the sun and the moon and a story, but then also think about uh, why Neil deGrasse Tyson had that dialogue with James Cameron about the night sky being wrong. And if you haven't realized, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a puppet, right? Just like the Chicago string theory guy. There's no equation. There's nothing that Neil deGrasse Tyson has done. Every time he interviews, it's always pop references to movies and all. Um, if you can't see through that yet, his name is Neil in thy grass for the sun, Tyson. This is why we have Tyson chicken. These words all go back to the sun. But he's arguing with, well, he had a little friendly debate with James Cameron online about the sky being wrong. I need you to go back and fix it. And just think about what Neil deGrasse Tyson is. He's a sun character. Every time he wears a tie, it has the sun on it. So, of course, he wants the sky fixed, right? Because he wants the sky to benefit the sun more than the moon. And that's why you have these kind of exchanges between them. So that's pretty much it. Please leave a comment, you know, if you see any similarities. I had a lot more examples, but I ended up forgetting, and I just wanted to get this video out. But if I think of some more, I'll probably make another video. But otherwise, have a good one.